Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. And first we're going to talk about the city by the name of Orsk that located on the territory of Russian Federation. The previous night and the previous day we got additional updates and additional details about another Ukraine attempt to attack the Russian radar of early warning about nuclear launchings. For example, on this small video we can see the differences between the Ukraine attack and after, and according to this satellite picture, according to information we have, the Ukrainians managed to deal damage to another radar of the type. I'll remind you that just a few days ago the Ukrainian sources published another photo, another video of how they managed to destroy or damage another radar that located in the southern part of Russian Federation in the vicinity of the town by the name of Armavir. So the same radar was destroyed in Orsk. So it's already two radar systems were destroyed, and according to information we have, Russia has just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, let's say radars of early warnings, and 20% have been already damaged or even destroyed by the Ukrainian forces. And we understand that those attacks were made, of course, by the Ukrainians, but the Ukrainians were just hands. The main, let's say, owner or the main, let's say, party that has interest in those attacks were, of course, NATO countries. For now, the Russians still haven't reacted on this situation anyway, so let's wait what is going to be next. Furthermore, we continue receiving updates about the Iran and Russian cooperation. According to information we have, Iran has sent the new type of, let's say, bombs to Russia, Kaim 5. The bombs, that's, let's say, guided bombs, very small ones, which is very, let's say, effective. And the Russians are planning to start using them, and most likely the Russians are planning to start using them using drones, not just like, let's say, aircrafts or something like this. It's going to be very interesting. Now let's move to the situation on the ground. Let's start from Kharkiv area. If you remember, and as you mentioned, Russians, at least the first phase of the Kharkiv offensive operation, mainly were operating with light infantry and artillery. And starting of this previous night and the previous date, we start receiving significant number of updates of how the Russians were redeploying significant number of armored vehicles and tanks to the line of combat contact. So most likely the Russians are about to finish or have already finished the preparation of the second phase of the Kharkiv offensive operation. When talking about the situation on the ground, we don't have any changes there, just the only video, for example, from the Russian side of FPV drone strike on Ukrainian positions in the vicinity of Liptsy. This video we're using just to adjust and just to see the line of combat contact and to understand where exactly are the Ukrainian positions and where are the Russian positions. Now let's move further to Vovchansk. We have some updates from this territory as well, just two important updates. The first one, we continue receiving the material and data about the situation in the, let's say, southern part of the northern Vovchansk. The Russians continue clearing the area. Of course, the Russians still have initiative on this direction. Most likely the northern part of Vovchansk will be captured by the Russians in the very near future. And for example, on this video we can see how the Russians continue bombing and attacking and destroying the bridge that connected the southern and the northern Vovchansk. So this is the moment when the Russians destroyed the bridge completely. So the Ukrainians lost their possibilities to support their forces from the south to the north. Furthermore, we got additional update about the fire anomalies map. Lots of explosions, lots of fire anomalies, but I would like to point your attention to two new, let's say, areas of activity. This is the first fire anomaly area, so that means that there are concentration of Ukraine, most likely artillery or FPV drone forces, and the Russians are bombing this territory heavily. And we have another fire anomaly right in, let's say, in front of this area, and we're talking about this part. So maybe this part of Vovchansk is already under complete Russian control. So there are like something like a duels between these two parts. Now let's move further. We have update about the 125th Territory Defense Brigade, which was redeployed on this direction with the purpose to stabilize the line of combat contact. And the Ukrainian sources are saying that the situation in the brigade is very difficult, that the brigade probably have maybe 80 or 70% or maybe more of 90% of the personnel, so it's not so bad. It's like a very powerful and fully loaded, fully blooded brigade. But the sources are saying that most of the soldiers of this brigade brigade have been recently mobilized, and they has a low, let's say, experience, and they are not, let's say, good at the line of combat contact, and so that's why the situation is very critical. And this is the thing that I would like to point to your attention. Currently, the Ukrainians are mobilizing people, and without almost any military exercises or trainings, they are sending these people to the line of combat contact. Now let's move to northern Kupiansk direction. We have additional updates. Pro-Ukrainian mappers Deep State confirms additional Russian progress in direction of Sinkovka and Petropavlovka, most likely after the fall of Ivanovka and after the Russians start advancing in direction of Stepovo-Novosilovka. The Russians also decided to activate their movements to the south from Vilshany to Petropavlovka, so most likely the next few days there are going to be attempts from the Russian side to break through the Ukraine defense belt and to capture additional positions. Now let's move to Ivanovka. We have reports that the Russians start offensive towards the village by the name of Stepovo-Novosilovka. That was the first update from the series batch of updates that we received during the previous night. And by the morning, we got more or less update showing or confirming additional Russian progress. And according to some Russian sources, the Russians were attacking and managed to improve their positions through the fields, let's say, on the northern part of Stepovo-Novosilovka. So something like this. If you remember, we talked and we covered this, let's say situation during the previous update, and I reminded that according to my understanding, the Russians first of all will try to semi-encircle Stepovo-Novosilovka before moving further to the west and before establishing complete control over the territory. So something like this the Russians are planning to make first, and only after that the battle for the village is going to begin. Now let's move further to the south. We have additional activity between, let's say, Ukrainians and the Russians in the vicinity of Makiivka-Novodyana, more precisely on the line Makiivka-Novodyana. The Ukrainian sources published another video of how they were bombing and attacking the Russian forces on the Ukrainian side of Zhiribets River, trying to destroy and to damage the concentration of Russian forces. But if we increase the numbers of days since the beginning of May, we're gonna see a very big concentration of fire from both sides, either from the Russian or from the Ukrainian side. We have a lot of destroyed Russian vehicles, a lot of FPV drone strikes on Russian armored vehicles, a lot of explosions. On the other hand, we see significant number of FAB strikes and explosions also in Makiivka. So most likely something big is going to happen very soon on this direction. Now let's move further to the south in direction of Chasiv Yar. We have additional updates from the territory. The Russians made another attempt to attack the Ukrainian positions in the eastern part of Chasiv Yar. The Ukrainian sources published the video of another Russian armored vehicle convoy attack on Ukrainian position. So according to Ukrainians, this video is fresh, and the Russians were using significant number of tanks. There are personnel carriers. The Russians entered the line of combat contact, landed the infantry, and started clearing the forest and started moving their infantry from the area of the railways to the, let's say, railway station 36 kilometer. This is the railway station 36 kilometer, with the purpose to enter the residential area of Chasiv Yar itself. Currently, we don't know for sure how exactly the battle ended, but most likely those were like another batch of reinforcement. We have additional updates from different reliable sources that the Russians managed to dig in between the Ukrainian defense belt in Kalinovka and the forest and to capture additional positions. The information was confirmed by different pro-Russian, let's say, assumed resources. We have additional updates from Klishchiivka direction. For the first time, probably during the previous few months, we got report that the Ukrainian forces of 5th Azov Brigade were depleted completely, not defeated, but depleted. The Ukrainians brigade lost its combat capabilities, and we start receiving this update right exactly. The main Ukrainian forces were forced to fall back from Klishchiivka. Most likely, this piece of news confirms that due to due to the loss of combat capabilities, most of the Ukrainian brigades from this direction will be redeployed to the Chasiv Yar. So we expect additional progress from the Russian side in this area. Now let's move to Avdiivka direction. We have additional updates from different mappers. Pro-Ukrainian sources confirm additional Russian progress in the vicinity of Vovchansk. The Russians captured additional 3 lines and managed to maintain the line of combat contact further in direction of the village by the name of Novosilovka Persha. The Ukrainian sources also reported that starting of the 28th of May, the Russians started moving further to Karlovka, and that the battle for Karlovka has begun plan. Currently, we can't tell for sure where exactly the main clashes are taking place, in the forest between Nitailova and Karlovka itself, or maybe the Russians have already entered the first residential buildings of Karlovka village. So for now, we don't have updates, but most likely, as we discussed in the previous videos, the Russians will be able to capture every single building that located, let's say, on the Russian side of Karlovka water reservoir. So this territory most likely will be captured by the Russians without any resistance or any problems from the Ukrainian side. We have additional updates from pro-Ukrainian mappers towards the village by the name of Nivoyska. Most likely very soon, this probably week, the Russians will make first attempts to attack Nivoyska itself. And as I understand, the Ukrainians are not going to fight for the village for a very long time, but they will be forced to fall back. Very interesting video was published by the Ukrainians in Krasnogorovka, something very interesting and unexpected. For example, on this video we can see Ukraine attempt to counterattack the Russian positions. The Ukrainians were using Bradley, and the Ukrainians started very far from the north and they moved very far to the south in direction of the railways, and after that the Ukrainians established control over the railways. Basically they cut the main Russian supplies and main Russian support, and for some period of time the Ukrainians were attacking the reinforcements and reserves of Russian armed forces. But the Russians discovered the situation very fast and started bombing and attacking the Ukrainian forces in the area, forcing them to fall back. The Ukrainians lost first Bradley, and after that the Ukrainians, those who managed to survive, ran away to the north. So this is very interesting because this video first of all shows us that the Russians don't have, let's say, the straight line of, let's say, defense. The Russians controlled most of Krasnogorovka, but they also have lots of problems, mainly connected with the lack of the manpower. So once again, the Ukrainian Bradley was moving something like this. The Ukrainians entered this part without any resistance from the Russian side. The Ukrainians entered this territory. The Ukrainians tried to dig in deeper and started attacking the Russian forces. Later they were destroyed, but the fact that the Ukrainians saw no resistance moving from the north to the south, it's very important that the Russians need to do something with this and not to allow this same situation in the future. We have additional updates from Orikhiv and Staromayorsk. The Russians managed to establish complete control over the southern part. We have another additional video published by the Russian sources of more attempts to attack from the south to the center, lots of tanks, lots of personal carrier. So in comparison with the previous attempts, now the Russians were attacking this territory, let's say full-scale attack with significant number of armored vehicles, personnel carriers. So that was something like the final phase of the clearing operation, and we can say that the battle for the central part of Orikhiv has officially started. And another important thing, that the farms were captured, and now the battle for residential area begins. So very interesting updates are going to happen more. Now let's move to Kiev. We have lots of updates as well. If you remember, yesterday we were talking that the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine reported that France is going to send the first instructors and troopers. And after this piece of news was, let's say, spread all over the world, the French Minister of Defense reported that there are still no agreements about this, and the France is not going to send anybody at least tomorrow or today. So of course I think that there are agreements. They just decided to reduce the pressure, to reduce the media noise of this situation. But anyway, the French troopers will be sent, and they will be sent very soon. Furthermore, we got updates about the average age of Ukrainian soldiers, and the average of the age of the Ukrainian military at the front has grown to 43-45 years. So it's a very old army, and of course it's very difficult with such an old army to fight with the Russians. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.